once you have defined the basic outline of the skeleton of your app or your whatever prototype you're trying to create, then you get to a point where you actually need to start importing or creating the elements of the design, the things that actually are going to give you the look and feel, things such as icons, buttons, and so on. So in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to look at how do we create icons and drawings, graphics within this application, and also how to import graphics, whether it is by importing and placing or by copying and pasting from other programs. So the process is fairly straightforward. Let me actually go ahead and focus on this particular artboard. And what I want to do is I want to create an icon that looks like this. So I just did a search for search icons, and I want to create an icon for my navigation that looks like this. So I'm going to click on that, copy image from the web. I'm going to go back to my artboard, and I'm going to paste it. Now, what I want to do at this point is I can either use this graphic, and notice that the graphic is now part of my application if I wanted, of my prototype, if I wanted to use that. But what I want to do is I want to recreate it to show you how to create drawings inside this program inside XD. So I'm going to use the circle tool to go ahead and create a circle right above this area. And what I want to do is I want to pick the border color of that graphic that I imported and also the fill color. So now my circle up here is going to look like that. And what I want to do is I want to resize it slightly so that it better matches my circle below. It doesn't have to be exact, so I'm just going for the look and feel. And what I want to do now is I want to increase the borders. So I want to start increasing by tens, and that gives me about, let's say about here is the size. Let's work with that, and that's going to be about 17 point size. Now, the problem with this approach now, as you will see in just a second, is that when I start resizing, my borders remain the same size. So I need to keep that in mind, because eventually this icon is going to fit in this space that I have reserved for it in the navigation. So I need to resize it. Therefore, I'm going to have to change the size of my borders. But for now, I just want to match this visually so you guys see how easy it is to create these things in here. Then for the little handle of the magnifying glass, I want to create a line that sticks out from here, and it goes about 45 degree in a 45 degree angle this way. To constrain a 45 degree angle, I'm pressing the shift key as I'm drawing the line, and that should be sufficient. I'm going to increase the width of that stroke to about 26 point, and then I'm going to pick the color of the one that came from the image. You'll notice that that line is above my circle. So if you look at the detail here, it's above my circle. So all I need to do is just push it underneath the ellipse on the stack, and that should do the trick. Then I'm going to make a copy of it while selecting it. I'm going to make a copy by pressing Control-C on the keyboard, or Command-C if you're working on a Mac, or right-click and choose Copy. And then Paste, which is Control-V or Command-V on the Mac. And then I'm going to resize that new copy while pressing Shift to constrain to 45 degree angles, so that I get the little lip down here that will be the shade or the shadow of the actual magnifying glass. Then I'm going to change the color of it by picking the darker color, and you'll see how it is on top of the circle. So I'll just go ahead and remove that right between the ellipse and the line, and there you have it. So that is how easy it is to recreate artwork here. Fairly straightforward, so not a lot of work. Now what I want to do is I really want to get rid of that line. I'm not going to be using that line in my icon. As a matter of fact, all of this is going to be white eventually, so I want to change that color later on, and I want to remove the fill. That's the first thing I want to do. So I want to deactivate the fill in its properties. Now I want to make the color of the handle the same color as my circle here. So I'm going to pick the color picker. Boom. Now I have my graphic. Now I don't need this graphic anymore in here. I don't need this image. So I'm going to select it, and I'm going to hit delete. Then I am going to select these two things, and I am going to resize it. Resize this so that it fits within the navigation up at the top. Now you'll notice that as soon as I resize, the sizing of everything it remains the same size. So at this point, I can just go ahead, and once I get to the actual size of the object that I want, which is roughly around this size, I can then go back and revisit the sizes for each one of these things. Let me see if I make this 5 point, and I'm going to make this about 8 point. And that should be a good size for the icon, let's say. And if I place it here, that's where my search button is going to go, or my search icon. So I can go ahead and place that in there. and that would be sufficient. So I'm going to maintain this right here on the, actually I'm going to put on the paste, I'm going to put on the side here for just a second so that it doesn't get on my way. Now let me show you another tool that is available for you to work with, which should be familiar from Illustrator, and that is your Pathfinder tool. So for that, what I want to do is I'm going to recreate, just to show you, I'm going to recreate the Instagram icon. This icon right here is something I'm going to recreate in the program. So I'm going to go to the web and I'm going to grab a copy of it. I shouldn't have clicked on it, sorry. I'm going to right click and I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to paste it into the program right here. So now take a look at what happens. When I paste it, it's significantly larger. I want to show you at this point something that you can do to make sure that your files actually fit within an area. If you have a predefined area, like this, for example, and you were to drag an image into that area, let me actually just drag a photo really quick by putting it, and when you notice that the box gets highlighted in blue and you feel it go, basically whatever image you were bringing in gets into that frame, into that container. So that helps you, because at that point I can go ahead and start resizing the frame, and the image will resize being responsive to the sizing that you're creating by moving the corners of that specific space. So that's something to know when you're creating these, when you're bringing in materials. It's a time saver. So now let's say, for example, I need to recreate this file. So how do I go about doing that? Let's go ahead and place this guy here. Increase it slightly in size. Let's say about that size. So what I want to do is I want to create first a box that's about the size of my icon right here. So roughly about that big. Let me move that out of the way so that I actually get back visibility into my icon. Just needed that for the sizing in there, and everything else I'm going to eyeball everything else for this particular exercise. So let me just bring that out, and you'll notice that when I'm creating rectangles or anything that has corners like this, I get the little handles that I get in Illustrator. So I can go ahead and either change the roundness of my corners by changing the radius value here, or I can go ahead and drag those from the actual interface itself and match what I see up here with the actual drawing. So it's up to you how you want to handle that that interaction. In this case, this turned out to be about 35 point based on the size of the box, so that works just fine. Then what I want to do is I want to fill in this object with a gradient. So I'm going to go to the fill swatch and I'm going to click on it. I'm going to switch solid color to linear gradient. You'll notice that I get the little handles that help me determine where my colors will go. So let me place this guy here and the dark in this corner. So that is sort of the gradient inclination that we see on the original logo. And over here, I'm going to start matching colors. So the first thing I want to do is I want to look for this one right here, which is the white. Right here on my gradient should be yellow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select it over here in the gradient tool, on the gradient bar, and then I'm going to click on the color pick, and then I'm going to click on the yellow, and you'll notice that only that swatch in the color bar changed color. That means that I can go ahead and click anywhere else within this bar, just like in the other programs, and start adding colors to my gradient. So let's say, for example, I want to add the red at this point. So I'm going to either change it from here if I want to change it from the bar, or I can pick a color. Then I'm going to add a purple around here. So let's say around here I'm going to use purple. I'm going to move that to the purple area to match that purple if I want to do that. And then for the final, I want to match that purple specifically. So I'll select the swatch here, color picker, and pick on the actual color. There you go. So roughly speaking, these are the same. That's how you would create that. Now this is too blue compared to that, fuchsia. So I want to change it. So I'll click on it to select it here, color picker, and then pick the color from the actual gradient. And that's a little bit closer now. So with that done, what I want to do is I want to create that box inside this box. So to do that, I'm going to make a copy of the box itself. So I'm going to go Control C, and then I'm going to be pressing Control V on the keyboard. And that pastes the box that I copied right on top of the other one. Now I'm using my constraint keys to resize. So this is Control Shift, and then if I press the Alt key at the same time, I'm pressing all three keys, Control, Shift, and Alt. It's allowing me to resize the artwork towards the center. Instead of being a freeform resize, it's constraining the proportions to the center. So doing that is going to allow me to create that box and resize it to whatever I want. I'm going to remove the fill, and I want to change the border color to white. I want to increase the size of that border to say, let's say, I'm going to give it a number like 8, for example. And that works. Now, this is a lot rounder than this is, so I can always go back and push those corners out to better match the one above. And that did the trick. Next, I'm going to use the circle tool, and I'm going to use my smart guides to tell me where the center of my drawing is right now. And you'll notice that as I roll over the center, I get the smart guides pointing to the center point. So in order to grow a circle from the center out, I'm going to start dragging to create the circle. Then I'm going to press Shift to constrain proportions. Then I'm going to press the Alt key to grow from the center out. Just like we were resizing the box a second ago, it also works when you're creating. Not just for resizing, but for creating as well. So I'm going to let go around here, and I'm going to change. I'm going to turn off. Actually, I'm not going to turn off the fill. I'm going to do an operation here to show you what the Boolean operations are, or the Pathfinder tools are in this program. So I'm going to make that circle, and then I'm going to make a copy of the circle, Control C, and then Control V on the keyboard to paste in front, and resize the one that is going to go inside it. Now, I want to knock out this circle from the one behind. So I'm going to go ahead and switch my tool to the arrow tool, and I'm going to shift select the other circle. So I have one circle in front of the other. Up here is where you have your Pathfinder tools, which you will recognize from your Illustrator interface. So if I remove the front, which is this one, subtract is going to remove the center smaller circle from the one behind, the larger one. And there you have it. Now I have made a circle to actually see through onto the back rectangle. And then for the corner here, I'm simply going to put a little dot, and there you have it. That is how you create this, recreate this icon fairly fast and inside the actual program. So these are extremely helpful to work with this. I mean, the tools here, as long as you have a pretty good understanding of the workflow, you should be able to recreate a lot of things fairly fast. Okay, so let me select all that, and I'm going to delete it. I don't need any of that for now. What I want to do is I want to change, I want to place this guy inside that component up there. So I'm going to select this guy, and I'm going to switch the color for this one should be, actually both colors should be white on the stroke. So let me change that, and I'm going to make them white, and so I don't see them anymore. I'm going to, in order to be able to maintain them together, I'm going to select both of them, and I'm going to group them. Control G on the keyboard groups things, just like in any other program. Control G or Command G on the Mac. And I'm going to cut it. I'm going to cut that piece. Then I'm going to double click on the component up here, so that I have access to the actual component. And I'm going to delete this icon right here, for example. Actually, yeah, let's go ahead and delete this icon. So I delete it, and you'll notice that it deletes from everything else. Then I'm going to paste my icon, and you'll notice that it now appears in all of the other components. That would become my search engine, or my search icon for this navigation. Okay, so this same way you would be able to create, let's say, for example, if we wanted to create an icon for my profile here, since this is an application that's going to be for purchasing modern style furniture, then I can do basically, this is my search tool to look for specific things, and this would be my profile because I am saving stuff for myself and so on. So you have the ability to create all the icons that you can use for your app, and then as like I said, you can either create them in here or you create them outside and you can bring them in. Now for images, to bring images like I showed you a few minutes ago, you can simply just create a box and say, for example, you wanted to place an image inside this box. You can just go ahead and get into that component and apply it. But since these are all part of the same grid, then this would be a good point to break everything apart. Before we do that, because we are doing a prototype, we want to go ahead and take advantage of the fact that we have things that are linked through the grid, through that repeat grid. But I don't know if you recall in the previous video when we created these, in order to delete one of the circles, we went ahead and removed the grid value from these circles. So I want to select all the circles and delete them, and I want to recreate them again. So now that remember I double click to get into the actual component, and so I am creating the circle that I want to use as the master circle for this grid that I'm about to create. So I'll align it here, and I want to use about 4 iterations of this. So I'm going to go repeat grid, and I'm going to pull it in this direction, 1, 2, 3, and 4. That should be sufficient right there. And let me go ahead and reduce the space in between them so that they overlap. So I want them to overlap just a little bit. And let me go ahead and stretch this out. I don't want to have that there. I don't want to have this one. So let me undo that really quick. And let's go ahead and expand this. Actually, I want them to overlap that much. So let me go ahead and double click it, sorry, so that I select the actual object and I see the little green thing. And I don't want to have an extra one there. So let me actually undo all the way to this point where I just created a new one. Repeat grid, and I'm going to stretch them out. And before I actually pull them back in, I'm going to make sure that they're just barely touching one another. And that should be sufficient right there. Yeah, like that. Okay, so that done. Let me go ahead and double click that to select it again. Sorry, I clicked off on the pasteboard. So now, because these are part of the same grid, of a unified grid, I can bring in 4 images into each one, an image into each one of these. So if I go to my folder outside of the application and say, for example, I grab 1, 2, 3, 4 images, and I drag them into that component because I have 4 containers within my grid. If I let go, each one of those images gets populated into the grid itself, and because it's part of the component, then it gets copied everywhere that is. And these would be, again, since this is prototype, this would be sufficient to showcase what it will look like when someone actually likes your whatever you're posting. And so, and then to place things into containers like this one, as I said before, then you would go and look for something that is that would fit within that particular container, and that would become the image. Now, because this one is on repeat mode, then basically all of the images are going to be the same. So this would be a good time to, let me undo that, and then once this is completed to the point that you wanted, each one of these is going to be an individual image. You can go ahead and say, okay, I want to go ahead and instead of dropping one single image for all of them like this, let me undo again. I want to go ahead and break it apart. So I'm going to ungroup the grid. So if I ungroup the grid, now each one of these components becomes a separate thing. And now I can go ahead and drop an image at a time. If I wanted to do something like, let me ungroup, oh, I'm sorry. Let me zoom out and let me ungroup the repeat grid. Okay, so let's go ahead and remove that. And now that that's, oh, I made this through a component. Yes, sorry. So I need to break it from being a component. So since I made it as a component, then that means I need to go ahead and drop into each one of them individually. And what that means is I'm going to go ahead and drop the first one on the chair, of the chairs on the top one. You'll notice that they occupy the same space. But if I go ahead and drop another image on this one, it's going to override that one because these are copies of the component. So I just simply went in and dropped different images, one per. And that way you're overriding the copies, override the master, which is the first component that we created. And so now this is taking more of the shape of what this is going to look like when I actually push out my prototype. Now what I want to do is I want to have some sort of landing thing here, and I want to change the colors on this, which we've already seen how to do, and get it to a better place where I can actually start creating the interactivity amongst these things. Now one last thing before I move away from showing you how to import images is that when you import, say for example, let me create a rectangle here. And you create, let's draw a rectangle. And, oh, I'm still inside the component, sorry. My apologies, let me click on that. And I'm gonna create a rectangle. Now this rectangle, I am going to place an image like I said before. So if I change my, the shape of my box, as you saw, I just changed the sizing because I have this responsive resize on, which you can turn it off, by the way, if you don't want to have it on. But by all means, keep it on, because when you resize or you move your device, you turn your device around, things will resize. You'll notice that it will maintain the proportions of whatever is in the container, even if you change the shape of the object. So let's say, for example, I want to really change the shape of this object. I don't want it to be this clean rectangle. I want it to be a knot size. So if I double click on the container, you'll notice that I have access to the different corners of my drawing. So if I go ahead and click and move one, I can resize the shape of my container, and my image will resize accordingly to match the sizing of whatever it is that I'm doing, however I'm morphing my object. So it's extremely helpful to have that responsive resize set on, and I usually keep it in auto when I'm working on prototyping. So now that we have this set up, let me go ahead and, like I said, finesse this a little bit so that it looks more like an actual app. And then the next video, we're going to be talking about the connectivity, how to make sure everything connects appropriately in order to create the proper prototype.